Welcome to the webinar, The Intersection of AI and Humanity and Impact Measurement, Gamify for Good, presented by SOCAP Global and Verto. We're excited to have you join us for a timely conversation on the evolving role of human insight, gamification, and lived experience in an increasingly AI-driven impact landscape. Today's session will highlight how meaningful, people-centered data can shape policy, elevate community voices, and complement technology in powerful ways. You'll also hear real-world examples like how Verto influenced education policy in the UAE. Now, I'm pleased to introduce our moderator, Laura Maher, Chief of Staff at Siegel Family Endowment. Laura leads storytelling, communications, and events for a foundation focused on the societal impact of technology. Her past work includes roles at the United Nations, the Brookings Institution, and the World Bank, and she holds an advanced degrees from Tufts and Harvard. Welcome, Laura, and thank you for leading today's discussion.
Thanks so much, Tova. I'm super excited for this conversation about the intersection of humans and AI in social impact work. We've brought together 3 global voices, all of whom use different methodologies to measure what matters and inspire action on that knowledge. Our goal today is to unpack some key themes: how to leverage the best of humanity and the best of AI to surface key insights, what it takes to do this work internally and across markets, and how to leverage those insights alongside the communities we seek to serve. So let's get right to it and introduce our panelists. So first up, we have Michael Sani, is the Chief Exploration Officer at Verto, where he leads the design of playful, purpose-driven tools that transform community voices into actionable insights. With over 15 years in the social impact space, he has partnered with governments, funders, and global institutions to reimagine data collection as a participatory, inclusive process. From shaping climate education policy in the UAE to supporting multilingual engagements across sectors, Michael uses gamifications to surface underrepresented perspectives and drive meaningful systems change. His work is rooted in the belief that data can be a catalyst for learning, belonging, and action when designed with the communities at the center. Carla Grados Villamar is a Latin American co-head for 60 Decibels, currently working towards increasing impact transparency via human-centered and voice-powered impact measurement in the region. Before joining 60 Decibels, Carla was involved in the Latinam social impact ecosystem. She is the founder of Lucha Startup Studio, the first impact venture builder in the Andean region, and Proa, an online platform that connects volunteers with causes that need them. She has also been the executive director in Cunan, a Peruvian social enterprise platform. She has over 10 years working in social innovation and sustainable finance, partnering and working with the UN, APEC, OECD, and IDB. She is currently part of the Peruvian National Advisory Board for Impact Investing and holds an MPP and an MBA from the University of Oxford. Unmesh Sheth is the founder and CEO of Sopact, a social enterprise that empowers organizations to measure and manage impact through data-driven tools. He believes impact measurement is not just about proving results, it's about driving continuous learning and improvement of product adoption. Yet many organizations treat it as a checkbox activity, missing the opportunity to make real progress. While AI offers powerful capabilities, it's no silver bullet. Without strong data collection systems, feedback remains fragmented and biased. Unmesh's work focuses on building the infrastructure that allows AI to reduce up to 80% of the time spent on data cleaning and dramatically improve insights from qualitative and longitudinal data. So thank you all for being here. Before we jump in, just as a reminder for everyone on the call, you can leave questions throughout the conversation in the chat, and we will have about 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. So let's get started. All right, so as we were diving into your specific work during our prep call, it became very clear that there were a lot of overlapping goals and values, notably the importance of stakeholder voice and putting humans at the center of data collection and analysis and action. And yet each of you take a slightly different approach. So I'd love to start by having you each say a few words about those specific approaches. Michael, let's start with you.
Sure, thank you, Laura. The root of our approach really is around playful experiences, because we believe that if you can engage someone in a fun and creative way, you build a connection. And once you have that connection, you get a more heartfelt response and therefore a better quality data. Obviously, we bookend that with the goal of really trying to ensure that everybody we invite to share understands the why behind their being asked. So what are the goals of this data collection? What do we hope to do with it? So we really try to manage the expectations of the player, as we call them, or respondent, as you would do traditionally. And then finally, it's that piece around, well, if we've developed a trust with someone to share their reality, how do we close that feedback loop to show them what we've done with that data? Obviously, our goal is to bring their voices to places where they often are most unheard, and yet the decisions made in those arenas affect them most. So that's the goal. And as I say, we try to do it really playfully with fun and creativity to sort of build that connection with people, develop a trust and a bond, and try to gather some excellent data that can be acted upon.
Yeah, I mean, gamification is a great way to engage participants. How is it also bridging that gap between quantitative and qualitative data and impact measurement? And, what are some of the greatest potential for gamified approaches? And I know you've got some great examples to share. So any practical examples of where gamification has sort of changed how you've engaged with communities or interpreted that data?
Yeah, I mean, play is such a powerful tool. We've done it for years as humans, and yet the older we get, we kind of stop playing. And so our approach to research and measurement is to just bring back a playful and creative way of doing so, because games sort of suspend our disbelief. We don't concentrate on borders or barriers or demographics. We just immerse ourselves, and that's kind of our approach, really. How do you build that connection with someone so that they really concentrate on what's being asked? And we see through that, even things like 3x in your average completion rate on a survey. Like Play Verto is at an 85% completion rate on average, compared to an industry standard of 20-30% for a quantitative and qualitative survey, right? So you sort of see actually playing gamification sparks curiosity. People are curious about the next question that's going to come. How are they going to ask me? And then I think equally, we sort of embed elements of gamification like tokenomics or collecting gems as you go through an experience, not to engage in rewards or incentives as such, but just fun and playful ways to keep people going. Because as I say, it's not about trying to create a panel where we're paying people for responses. We're trying to engage people to share their lived experience in the hope then we can do something with it. We can influence decisions, we can make that data available to the impact space for them to shape programs or try to advocate for policy. And I guess, the most recent real world example would be what Tova alluded to in the intro, where we engaged 102,000 learners in the UAE to share with us their realities of their climate education. And after we crunched the data and presented the findings to the ministry, they shaped policy based on the data. So it was a very real world example of how we could engage young people en masse and then bring their voice into places where they're not often heard, but they get to actively shape one of the biggest things that's going to affect them for the next 5-10 years. So it was super fun. And we did an action workshop 4 months later where we brought people together, and people were saying, oh, that survey was really cool. And it's like, people don't often remember being asked to fill in a survey. They certainly don't say it was cool.
It's true. I don't think that often happens in standard research surveys, and it's just an incredible high response rate and number. So how about Carla? Let's turn to you next. Can you tell us a little bit more about your work at 60 Decibels?
Yes, of course. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's actually a wonderful conversation and, of course, very timely. And 60 Decibels, well, we are a global social impact measurement company that is fully centered in what we call user customer voice. Like, we really want to measure impact in a bottoms up kind of way, where what matters the most is what the people experiencing the impact actually consider matters the most. And in that sense, our usual approach is very agile. It aims to be very agile, to a certain extent, quite standardized, but also actionable, because most of the times that we focus on measuring impact, we measure it to validate that something is happening, if it's positive or if it's negative. And we usually archive that data and not do much about what we found out. And then the best way that we can action it is actually listening to the voices, understanding what's going on, and then going back and implementing changes that are life changes. So that's why it aims to be agile. It doesn't aim to have like a year of evaluation or 2 years, but be completed in 2-3 months. That's kind of the heart of it. So the process is quite simple. We just actually draft surveys, as all of us do here, I think. But these surveys have this kind of particularity that part of them are, of course, quantitative and standardized because we aim to provide benchmarks. But the heart of the survey is open and qualitative, and it's meant to identify what we call non-predetermined outcomes. Like we avoid going into an intervention and saying, we're going to measure X, Y, Z because ABC could be happening. And we're not seeing it because we're not measuring it. And the open qualitative part of the survey is as statistically significant, but it allows us to really understand from the user's voice what is going on that we are not even measuring or looking at. And then, of course, we collect data. That's where we personally are implementing most of kind of the technological advances, let's say, with AI. And I'm going to speak about that later. And then the analytical part and how you visualize it so you can actually make it as actionable as possible.
Yeah. And I believe 260 decibels is the volume of the human voice, because you are all very centered around voice, just for those who aren't familiar. But yeah, I mean, I guess just a quick follow on that, to what extent, can we or have you found it worthwhile to rely on humans collecting that human voice versus AI collecting that human voice? And I don't know if you have any examples of that.
Yeah, no, of course. And before, I just always make a joke that 60 decibels is, of course, the average volume of human conversation worldwide, but it's not the case in Latin America. We're a bit above that. And I'm pretty sure in other regions as well. But yeah, we have been always focused in data collection through humans for humans, because we really value that the survey is more of a conversation, a human conversation. It doesn't actually feel like a survey. That's why we also have quite high response rate within average, I would say, survey response rates, but most like to the higher range because they are short 10-minute conversations. And that's why we have aimed to keep it human, the data collection, I mean. But the challenge of human data collection is that it's less scalable and more expensive in certain cases. So we started testing conversational AI data collection. We are actively testing it mainly in Latin America with a couple of AI bots, a woman and a man. And what we found is that it is indeed more scalable and keeps the quality of the data when on the other end, the user, the one experiencing the impact, is open to digital conversations. It's open to bots, trusts the digital aspects of an intervention, or most importantly, is connected. Because they're hardest to reach populations that are not even connected or have a way of sharing this if it's not via a human conversation. And that's our main kind of difference. We keep human conversations when it's hardest to reach, and we are piloting more and more AI-based data collection when it's more of like an urban population.
That's helpful. All right, thank you. And Unmesh, can you tell us a little bit about your work at Sopact?
Yeah, thank you. I would love to. What I'd like to say is that we've been around for 10 years and started some of the key innovation in impact measurement. And our focus has always been a bit more of a technology-centric altogether. So we have clients who really are focusing on getting more near-time or real-time feedback from the program. So, for example, King Center or many other organizations who often collect volumes of data. Unlike 60 decibel that goes human to human, obviously a lot of geographical focus is in the United States and Australia and more developing countries, and some Africa as well, and because essentially we work on a lot of funds as well. But the main thing is to providing a near real-time feedback from the stakeholders. So as soon as, let's say, training events has happened, you collect the feedback and our system will automatically analyze it and you get a dashboard that gives you insights. Now, before the AI, obviously, there are so many aspects of data that one has to understand. One is the qualitative data, which used to take forever to analyze it. And that makes it so fast, so rapidly, almost real time, getting that. Longitudinal, pre and post, has the girls coding boot camp, has that increased the confidence? And again, by collecting unbiased feedback, you can really know quantifiably that is this really improving. We are even more excited about the AI, partly because it offers even more interesting, more exciting use cases that were not possible before. For example, multimodal data or human-to-human data collection process, which can make it so simple. So what is a multimodal data? Multimodal data is essentially collecting data, not only qualitative aspect from the open-ended feedback, but a large amount of documentation. So the fund manager can do real-time due diligence process, or agriculture organization can simply take photographs of their crop and get the real-time impact and what kind of intervention they should be having, or the video that can essentially do that. So this is a phenomenal time to be part of the impact measurement. But the key thing in this all of this thing is that data is the foundation. And we want to make sure that the sector is prepared for high quality data collection practices and right tool to measure and manage the data altogether. And so that's a key summary of some of the things that we've been doing altogether.
Yeah. I mean, you have such a long history doing this work too. Are there any stories that stand out about any of your clients that has been able to unlock a bigger change given their use of your platform and how they're collecting and acting on their data?
Yeah, most of the clients, I can give you give it one example of King Center, Kurama, which is the fund manager essentially that aggregates data across Africa on different the programs they may have and investments, and they act more like an accelerator/funding entity altogether. And aggregating the data is a very time-consuming exercise altogether. And there are a lot of structural and data and technology issues, like not having proper unique ID can cause huge amount of issues in stitching the data. So most organizations like that, or ICF, which is Coaching Federation Organization, they used to take months or even year to analyze those results. Now almost becoming days altogether. That's a huge change in how people are benefiting from it. Again, this is a lot more valuable when you have been continuously collecting data and getting faster insights. But the issues of data, unique ID are very important. And by centralizing those data in one data warehouse like situation, you can get much deeper insights and ask more actionable feedback from vast volume of data.
Amazing, thanks. Well, Unmesh was already taking us here, but then the sort of next set of questions we have is about AI specifically. You know, it's rapidly changing the way we collect and analyze data. So where have you found in your work that AI adds the most value in impact measurement? And then kind of on the converse of that, like what do humans still do better? Carla, why don't we start with you?
Sure, of course. So from the 60 decibels experience, we usually divide the whole process of impact measurement into 4 steps, 4 blocks, let's say. So the kind of onboarding, where we get to learn about the project, the intervention, why did the organization or the team design it as such. And we do it because we want to design or identify the correct indicators that will translate into a survey. So the second part then turns into data collection, which I'm going to speak a bit more about. The third is analysis. And the fourth, I would say, is how you interpret that analysis and action on it. So on the first part that we consider this kind of onboarding and design phase, we currently are not using AI. We do use tech, but not AI. Just thinking out loud here, the way we work is, as I mentioned before, we have certain standardized metrics and certain more like open ad hoc metrics that then we translate into a survey. And it takes a bit of time really aiming to understand a business model, an impact model, and identifying the correct metrics for it. Sometimes they come with metrics, but they want to be more standardized to speak the same language as the rest of the industry or the rest of the impact investing sector. So that process of matching kind of standardized indicators and non-standardized indicators with a model takes time. And if you get an AI, I guess, to learn about this and suggest top indicators, that will be much faster. but I would definitely suggest a human eye just to confirm that is the case at the end. Then on data collection, like once you have the survey and you move on to the next step, I wouldn't say it's necessarily where it adds most value for our case. It adds value for one type of audience within of everything we do, because we're trying to actively reach the hardest to reach all the time. But we also want to provide more access and scale to those that are already reachable, that are not even being listened right now. So AI does provide help in scaling that, but not necessarily to the hardest to reach, unless kind of the telco systems and data access also reach them. Then the third part is where I would say that's more value right now, that is analysis. And Unmesh mentioned it. I think it can really make analysis run way faster, live, on time, not only with quantitative, but mainly qualitative data. Like in our case, and I guess also in the case of Michael and Unmesh, it just codifies data faster. But again, and I would say where it adds possibly less value or you need more of the human element is in the interpretation. Like AI has biases. We do too, but AI biases is based on secondary data that is already uploaded everywhere. If we collect new data, primary data, we are the ones that are able to adjust our biases based on that and interpret the data also based on that. So I would say from the 60dB perspective, where do we find more value right now? We are adding value in data collection, but we would definitely see more value fully 100% in the analysis. And I would suggest like the human aspect still is strong in the interpretation.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks for breaking it down so clearly for us. Unmesh, Michael, from your experience, same question.
I can take a stab at that. So I think, as I mentioned, I'm very excited and very positive about the use of AI into the impact measurement. As I mentioned, not only analysis gets a lot more easier, but many of the participants here in the webinar might know that the huge value is going to come from agent-based infrastructure that is already coming and revolutionize the how. So it can do whole host of things, from giving you follow-up to certain human interactions after that data is thing. So let's say I have NPS score that is I'm watching every day, and suddenly NPS score is starting to go down. I can look at the qualitative feedback right after that and say, oh, these are the reasons, some of the change we made, and that's really caused the NPS to go down. And now I can, instead of taking months or years to improve my process, I can literally get feedback in a very short period of time altogether and make a correction. So it's all about actionable approach or actionable insights, which can really improve the results.
I just build upon that, Laura, if I may. I think elements of what both Carla and Unmesh have said is relevant for us. There's still certain key parts of the sort of design journey where we rely on humans. AI is playing a great role within our analysis and even just the technology itself. But ultimately, AI can't do two things at the moment. AI can't collect data, and AI can't act on insights. And I think that's the crucial part where, for us at Play Verto, it's really crucial that you're reaching the voice of lived experience, bringing that data into the AI to analyze, for example. But we're trying to do this to change systems, to tackle root causes of why things exist in the first place. And AI can't do that alone. You need human relationships, because you're speaking to governments and ministries and head of corporations. And in fact, most of the times, even if you share an ambition to drive change, you need a relationship. You need to build trust. You need to give space to someone to share their fears, because they're accountable to a boss or a constituency. So AI can't automate that. And that's where I think humans are really essential. And if you've got great data that gives evidence, that gives someone a sense of, I can act on this with confidence, then ultimately you work towards influencing systems and tackling root causes of some of the issues that we're passionate of changing.
Yeah, I love that point. Actually, at Siegel, we have a saying, which is, AI is really good at creating content, but only humans can create context and community. And those are the two things I think y'all have touched on with your answer. So super appreciate those points. I mean, I think another thing what I'm hearing from you all too is just like the human element, that insight, the experience, the participation, the trust, like that's still essential for impact measurement. So, just next set of questions, as we're incorporating some of these AI tools, like thinking about how we keep, like where and how we keep humans at the center of the work. Actually, Unmesh, for this one, I'm going to start with you, just because you all integrate a ton of data from across all these different sources into one clean pipeline, which is not something every organization has. So, like, how can we prepare, or how can organizations prepare to take advantage of some of these tools? Like, what do they need in terms of data collection? Like, what should people know going into it?
Yes, thank you. Sorry. First thing is that not getting into a situation where data is all over the place is the short and sweet answer. And there are techniques to avoid that. But in reality, it's a little bit difficult to avoid. So an organization that may be collecting the onboarding data on a webinar, then they will be enrolling on different systems, then using Salesforce, then using survey to do pre and post analysis. So in reality, most organizations has a hodgepodge of the systems that really creates a data fragmentation all over the places altogether. In situation like this, there's only one to do this, which is really think of this whole process not as a data centralized and putting every data into Salesforce, because that is very messy for most social impact organization, because it requires a lot of capacity to design the systems properly altogether. Best alternative, obviously, in those situations is to make sure there is a unique ID as possible, and you have a data warehouse like thing where you can unify all the data in a singular location. And that's one sort of situation where people have been collecting data for a long time. Now, we are also rethinking how to even avoid the situation. And the way to do it is essentially make sure that you have a very simple but flexible way of collecting data so that you have always clean data at all the time, whether from application, enrollment to pre and post, which can be done seamless way. And this is where AI is significantly changing the game, because the way you design is that you have one data sets of the data. Let's say a student life cycle. I can chat with the data after that and get insights onto how things are progressing over the year altogether. So there are techniques that are emerging altogether. We can go in more detail, but fundamentally, I would say centralization and always keeping data clean is the best way to move forward in this area.
Centralization and cleaning, love that. I mean, Carla, I think something else you were touching on too is just like that efficiency piece too. So, I mean, Carla, when you think about this, like what's the right balance of, thinking about using AI for efficiency versus for human data when you're listening to stakeholder voice?
Yes, I mean, and it has been touched upon before, and I also briefly mentioned but AI can really make things faster in certain situations. And I would say that is where we need to find the balance. What are those situations where AI can support the impact measurement system and process and monitoring and analysis? And I did share that from this like kind of a breakdown of the IMM process, let's say, or the impact measurement process really, where we are focusing the most in piloting AI right now is data collection and analysis. Analysis, I think we all agree that it's a great tool for analysis, and we need humans to interpret that analysis also. In data collection, there's more of like a controversy on where is the balance for efficiency. And I, at least from the 60 decibels perspective, mentioned before that let's focus on those that are connected, right? To try to collect data through conversational AI, which essentially means a human is not calling you via the phone, it's a bot calling you via phone. Because there are also digital surveys, like WhatsApp surveys and online surveys, but we want to keep the element of conversation because we've seen that that's what gives the highest qualitative data. So in order to keep that element of conversation, we're trying this these bots that are calling beneficiaries or clients or users directly. And there's a case we shared on this fintech in Peru called Valdecash. They provide credit for students, and students are naturally very digitally engaged. And we had great results with conversational AI, like great response rate. I think the whole idea of, wow, a bot is calling me and it's not a recorded message. They are adapting to what I'm saying. It's quite interesting. So you keep the conversation going. So that was great. And then we say, okay, let's apply this to all fintechs. And then we started trying with a couple other fintechs, and there's a fintech that has older population, I would say much older population, and it didn't work the same way. And they're digitally enabled, they're using an app, all of that, but they don't trust the bot. They want a human conversation. So it's not only about being digitally connected, it's also about the trust, and Michael mentioned it, how you create that human connection to actually have quality data. So I would say in certain cases, it will provide efficiency. In certain cases, it will not. Maybe it's not the right timing right now or the right situation, and we're constantly looking for that situation. Where we definitely don't test it is the hardest to reach, not yet at least.
Yes, no, I love that point. Just kind of that return to just trust as a way to get better, like more authentic results. Michael, I think your work touches on that as well. Well, I guess Michael started when I think Unmesh, you did a great job talking about like how to get ready for data in using AI tools. Carla sort of unpacking a little bit in the middle. But Michael, I mean, I know one of the things that's really important for you all and something that you all excel at is, how we share and make visible that data to the communities that we're trying to serve and the individuals we're trying to serve. So, can you talk a little bit about how you share those results back with the communities and what opportunities or challenges you see by, helping expand and close that feedback loop?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we try to do it in a number of ways. Sometimes at the end of a given survey or Verto experience, there'll be an anonymized results page where you see the answer you gave anonymously compared to everybody else that's played. And that's quite an effective way in the moment for an individual that, to just have a moment with that data and reflect on it. Because actually, I think many of us often experience the misconception that it's just me, nothing ever changes, when in reality, it's never just you. And when you see yourself in the 66%, 86%, that's where we hope that element of agency comes. Does that give you the confidence to mention something at the dinner table, challenge a friend in a conversation where they have a view and you're like, actually, also, when we think about younger demographics, we've kind of lived through a media that categorizes them as one block young people. And in that, they think and feel so differently. So when they get to see the data, that might influence the way they shop, the way they vote, if they volunteer. So that piece of agency, I think, is such a crucial element of letting someone be part of the data. Secondly, obviously, it's the encouragement of the client and partner we're working with to make that data, the anonymous results, open. That can be a bit of a challenge sometimes when you're working within an institution or a government, especially where you've gone and done this baseline research and the reality of the data might be a little bit, we don't want that to go out, or the re-election's around the corner, or actually that contradicts maybe some of our manifesto pledges. And that's really hard, because what you want is that sort of authenticity with the people you've engaged with and the client and partner to say, actually, we're going to be really transparent and these are the results. And now we're going to work hard at changing them. But that takes a lot. And I think sometimes you ultimately come up against fear. And that's normal. That's a human feeling and emotion that we all go through. But working hard with people to sort of change hearts and minds and say, let's be honest with people about the results we got, knowing that we're working to change them. And actually, if we bring them as a key actor in that change-making journey, what can they do at a grassroots level? It becomes a little bit more holistic, and then it eventually takes the pressure off the funder, the corporate, the grantee, the system. So yeah, we try to do it quite holistically, but picking up on Carla's point earlier, there's still such a human role to play in that, weaving it together.
Yeah. And humans aren't like AI. It can't just update our code and have us believe or act differently. So it is a much longer part of the process there. All right, well, last bucket of questions here before we move on to the ones coming in from the Q&A, all of which are great questions. We're going to have a ton of time to get to them. But, one of the things that, we talk about at Siegel, one of our grantees, actually, ICA Fund, speaks really eloquently about this idea of propagation, which isn't just like scaling or replicating a promising approach. It's really growth in a way that's like mindful of context and adapted to the people that you're trying to reach. And I feel like the way that you all are approaching your work kind of really resonates with that. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about, what it might take to propagate your approaches. What's standing in the way. Maybe Unmesh, I'll start with you. You've been doing this for 10 years. What do you think are some of the blockers to adoption, and what patterns do we need to break and rebuild?
So I come from corporate world technology. In fact, I was in Silicon Valley, and I always felt that social impact world has been 10 to 20 years behind when I started data work. And I think I see the same behavior of pushing back. AI is not me, ethics and all those baloney, actually, in my opinion. So fundamentally, people need to get comfortable with AI is here to stay. So, and if you take that as an opportunity, you're going to change a lot of things that you do altogether. There's a tremendous opportunity by essentially designing, and biggest challenge, obviously, social impact world has there's capacity in terms of data technology and the impact management part of it. But this is the once in a lifetime opportunity. If you design and collect the data in a more effective way, AI can be your friend, an amazing friend, in fact. But you have to remove your biases. And I would say, historically, some of the funders have done disservice to this sector, partly because they have made this whole sector just prove the impact. But fundamentally, that's not the goal we should be having. The goal we should be having is, how can I improve the impact? And that can only happen if you're continuously learning and improving the data on a continuous basis. And AI is amazing tool for that. And I hope that people really remove their biases about AI and continue to learn and leverage the things in a proper manner altogether.
Yeah, I really like that point. Similar question to Carla, as you guys grow, especially with some of those, hardest to reach communities and geographies, how are you thinking about, AI helping scale your impact, and what's critical to ensuring this kind of propagation remains authentic and effective?
I would say and highlight the authenticity of the whole process. It's very much grounded right now in the human element on both sides, on our side and on the person that is experiencing the impact side, and every single point of that chain, right? The funder or client that is supporting a portfolio company, NGO, or startup that is doing the intervention and finally getting to that end user. And in that sense, AI can help us scale in the sense that we are currently collecting data in more than 90 countries. And we're collecting data essentially through local teams, like local researchers that speak local languages, and many different local languages, because we, again, in this line with the hardest to reach, it's very hard to collect data if you don't speak many different languages and then are able to translate it into the most common used language that tends to be English. For Latin America, it's Spanish. That is quite different. And it takes time to train and identify people that speak many different languages to then collect the data for many different projects. So then you find a couple of people, of persons that can speak a specific language, but then you have 5 projects that need the same language, so then same person, and you cannot multiply this person. You have to have the project in 5 different projects, not running in parallel. If you can actually train an AI bot, a conversational AI bot, to do this, then you could conduct this in parallel, and to Unmesh point, then you can have live data that you're analyzing and acting on it to improve the intervention within 3-4 months and not 1 or 2 years, because we want to improve an action on that data. The challenge is that for authentically propagating this process, we will always kind of need a human to review that AI bot, to adapt it to context. What is said in one language doesn't replicate exactly in the other language. Context affects language. There are many things that are very human to the whole process. And what I'm trying to say at the end is AI can help propagate, but we'll always need the human aspect to it. So it's more of like it's allowing us to enhance and make the process faster. But we always consider that humans are going to be part of it, but at least we're going to make it more accessible to more organizations that even now it's a bit costly to measure and monitor and act on their impact.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful example of propagation. All right, Michael, last word here before we move to audience Q&A. You've worked with a lot of both funders and actual policymakers and practitioners. What messages do you have for them? How can they ensure that data-driven decision making, especially ones that use AI, remain that inclusive, community-centered sort of reflection of lived experience rather than just top-down analysis, which we often see?
I think one of the biggest factors is just that reevaluation of the current systems and processes that we're using. Because if I take examples of grantees and grantors relationships, many people apply for money, they to strengthen their work or deliver a bigger impact, but they get given an Excel spreadsheet with KPIs, like we're measuring this against your fund, and so many people basically are putting square pegs in round holes, and it's so inefficient and timely. And I think this sort of taking a step back and thinking about the future of measurement, and are we really equipping grantees and people serving those with lived experience with the best tools to reach communities, gather insights and act on those insights? That would be fantastic, because data collection process is tedious, right? The survey fatigue is real. And how many of us listening today have been asked to share data, and we open a traditional platform and it's dull, and we, with all the best will in the world, we start and we close it, or we just leave it open, never to return. It's painful all round. And I think removing those pain points so that the person hoping to gather and act on the data gets the data, the person you're hoping responds and shares their lived experience, participates honestly and authentically, and is not sort of click, I'm 3 surveys away from my Amazon voucher. We just need to reevaluate the whole dynamic. And for me, the most disruptive way to do that is making it playful and fun, because serious work doesn't have to be so serious.
As a person who feels obligated to take all the surveys sent to me, even if I'm having a median experience, because I know that is an important data point, I would love for it to be better and more playful. So appreciate your work. All right, well, let's move. We got some questions here from the audience. I want to start with one from Lindsay, which is, how do your approaches validating generative AI generated it's on the screen, great, qualitative analysis, and ensuring it's representative of particularly marginalized groups? I butchered it. It's much better on the screen.
In general, I mean, that is a controllable process, essentially. When you are taking the data collection, essentially the first step you do is to define the demographics. And it's important to make sure that their voice is properly thought through. I think one of the challenge, obviously, is if you don't design the right stakeholders and the representative of the multiple communities altogether, you are going to get garbage in, garbage out. So ultimately, it's up to the survey designer and process who creating that they can make sure that it's a very broad enough and really represents most of the marginalized community. It's a controllable activity, in my opinion.
I would just add one point to that. The main qualitative analysis that we do is codify open-ended questions. And putting a code, giving a code to a specific type of answer, it's, I would say, an art. Because what a person experiences will differ a lot depending on context, on the product or service they are experiencing, on their age, as Unmesh mentioned, their demographics. So AI can codify qualitative data like this. Just try it out on ChatGPT. It's very fast. But then go through the open-ended responses and see if they are effectively connected to the codes that ChatGPT gave you. And most of the times they're not, because ChatGPT is going to code based on something. But then you can train for every single different project that GPT into providing the actual relevant context to codify that open-ended response. And as Unmesh mentioned, like, you can manage it, but there, and I will repeat myself here, always have to have, at least in our experience, a human eye and an expert eye on that context, that country, that sector.
And I can add on that what you just said, Nenaka, is that once you have done the codification process and you have applied some of the demographic group, it's an opportunity that even if you have a broad, some of the marginalized group and some of the not marginalized group, we can hear the difference in what their outcome or the things that they need are maybe significantly different. And by essentially filtering those by different demographic groups and the responses you see through the codification process can be tremendously insights. And so you could offer multiple products, for example, or multiple services for that matter. So to me, I'm not sure I would worry about that aspect. The main thing is to make sure that you are focusing on the collecting right and effective data that includes the age group or education group or whatever really you think it's important. And the codification can help give you faster, depending insights. What is it every stakeholder group want?
Yeah, thank you all. Let's hop to another one from Apollo, which says, as a program evaluator, I see a great deal of conceptual alignment with social impact measurement. Given that program evaluation has a long established history and a wide range of proven tools and models, how is the social impact measurement community ensuring it leverages the existing body of work to accelerate its own progress and avoid those common pitfalls? And Michael, maybe I'll kick this over to you to start.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot in that question, Apollo, and I think one of the pieces I'd like to refer to is how the social impact community that we've been working with now for a number of years is trying to do it a little bit differently, and that's centered around data sharing. And we're not talking about personal data or anything like that. We're talking about anonymized, aggregated results and having access to that data, because individual social enterprises might be reaching 200, 500, 1,000 members of the community through its programs. But actually, if you can give people access to a global data set on the same themes and issues and topics, good quality data in the hands of social entrepreneurs can go so far. They can turn up at crescendo moments like COP and UNGA and Davos and be the representation of those realities. So what I'm seeing done differently is data collection is not sitting behind paywalls. It's not difficult to access. If you do access data, it's not years old and outdated. It's about this dynamic data that's accessible by impact entrepreneurs to then really be the custodians of those realities and bring it to the places where decisions should be made. So I am seeing that around this, individual entrepreneurs and even grant bodies are now making anonymous data available to the whole portfolio to try and ripple out the impact of that data as much as possible.
Thanks, Michael. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that I don't think the AI is changing the body of the work that is being done by program evaluators for many years. All it does essentially is significantly reduces time it takes to evaluate and getting the answers on how do you score, how do you really get qualitative insight, how do you understand some of the things much faster altogether. So I think there's no need to throw away all the work that has been done by the program evaluation community. And I think, to me, AI is a huge friend of the evaluation community.
Yeah, actually, that sort of touches on something that's another question in the chat here from Priya, which is, how do you handle data privacy and anonymization if you are codifying data on a ChatGPT? And speak to the privacy. Actually, there's two questions I suppose we're merging together. Yeah. So anyway, just touching a little bit on the relationship between data and privacy, granted that because we need so many different data from so many different sources if we're trying to make these bigger changes, but how are you navigating that?
So this is a complex topic, essentially. But I would say one thing. Two observations. One is that when you are collecting data, you don't necessarily have to feed the private information to ChatGPTs of the world. You are literally using ChatGPT to get their feedback, which are anonymous altogether. But there is also a very large body of work that is emerging, which is called RAG. It's a code word for basically localized private AI altogether, which is being used now very successfully by the corporate world. And what it does is it keeps your qualitative data that you have in-house without even sharing outside altogether. So it's a very common technique being used, which is vector-based database that can help you make sure the data remains private and doesn't go to the ChatGPT of the world. So, and it's a bit technical, obviously, but it's not that rocket science either. But it's something that I would, if you're truly interested, I would start looking into some of those areas.
Just to complement, in our case, and the main reason why we cannot share data back to the end user or beneficiary, like saying this is how you compare to the rest, is because from the start of data collection is fully anonymized. So we, as 60 decibels, don't know who the data comes from. It's part of our data protection, data privacy process. So it's fully anonymized. Of course, there are limitations to this, like sharing back, right? And being able to see yourself within a broader pie. And I think that's something that where we're gonna go, and we want to learn more of how Verto is doing it, really. But that's our limitation right now, is all of our data is fully anonymized. And that also allows us to, in certain occasions, increase response rate.
Yeah.
Great. All right, we're gonna, we have time for one more question here. Why don't we have, so there's a couple of questions about which specific tools that you all are using. So maybe why don't we wrap up by having everyone share one of the AI tools they're using and a little bit about your experience with it.
I'm biased.
Yeah,
Sopact is leading one of the very innovative data collection. So our focus has been making sure that not only you collect the data in different languages and different offline, online, but more importantly, data that can be always cleaned all the time, avoiding any duplications and all those things altogether. And more importantly, multi-model data as well, which means that you can collect all sort of data and get real-time feedback altogether. There are many tools out there. Obviously, not everything we do is that everybody needs. Also, so the WhatsApp, the area where Carla, there are a lot of AI agents coming up in a WhatsApp-based thing, and so it's a very complex topic. And there are hundreds of tools out there, by the way, as well. I want to just so ultimately it's all about what is your use case and what exactly you're trying to achieve. If you have that, it's easier to understand the right tool. Otherwise, it's an ocean.
Yeah, I would just quickly add, we are testing tools for content analysis and tools for conversational AI scripting. And they're different tools, and there are many different ones. So we're testing different ones because we're testing the quality of all of them. The latest one we're testing, and I invite you all, if you're wandering into the space of AI, to test many, but just literally search different tools for whatever you want the AI to do. And in data collection right now, lately is VAPI, I don't know how to say it in English. I say it in Spanish, VAPI. But there are many. That's the latest one we're testing.
For me, we have a very sort of basic example how we've used an AI-driven sort of tagging system on our questions and answers. And this is to help us categorize and filter, and mainly for the clients and partners that have helped collect the data to be able to see in a dashboard the categorization of that data in near real time. And that's been wonderfully effective to start, because obviously you can ask questions that can touch on so many different themes, and to try and have a filtering system to equip people to start to go in and draw out the relevant information for them. AI has been great for that. And the rate that AI advances has also been great for our developers, because, you know, you making tweaks to the code base that takes the platform on new leaps and bounds. So that's been wonderfully effective as well.
Great, thank you all so much. All right, I would love to just kind of wrap us up here. I'll give a couple of high level things I heard. Yeah, and there's a ton more questions, but unfortunately we are out of time. But you can connect with the speakers. We'll tell you how to do that in a minute. But just to kind of wrap us up on some of the things that I've heard. One is, you know, just trust and authenticity across the whole life cycle of impact measurement. You know, the design piece, like right sizing what and how you'll measure, collection, you know, leveraging play and engagement and building those relationships to make sure that people are bought in, you know, interpretations, you know, centering the quote narrative in the numbers. I think there was a comment akin to that in the chat, and I really loved that phrase. And then just the actions, as Michael said, only humans can actually act on things. I think a huge second piece is, again, that just stakeholder participation, you know, from interpretation to action, you know, us, you know, we as the custodians of our reality, both, you know, how we're interpreting it and how we want to shape it. And then finally, again, I think this was talked about in the chat a little bit, but just about, you know, the change management. You know, half of the battle of AI is just, you know, getting people to buy into it and use it and be, you know, less fearful and, you know, think about how it might augment rather than automate, and also just how to ensure that humans remain at the center of what we're doing and how we're serving. So those are the, you know, we need both relationships and data to make the kinds of change that we want to make at scale. So those are my takeaways. I don't know if anyone else has anything for the good, or any other points I missed. And the other burning points I missed, panelists, before I turn it back over to Nicole?
You got it all right.
Thankful. Well, thank you all. I feel like I was the AI in this situation, just summarizing all of the wonderful points you made. So thank you all so much for sharing your knowledge and your work with us. And with that, I would love to turn it back over to Nicole for closing remarks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura. On behalf of SOCAP Global, I want to thank you all, our amazing speakers, our amazing moderator, and the audience for attending the webinar and asking such amazing questions and comments. All our attendees will receive a recording of the webinar via email, along with the speakers and the moderators' LinkedIn's, although I've already shared them in the chat. For further conversations like this, please join us at SOCAP 25 on October 27th through the 29th in San Francisco. And again, thanks everyone for joining, and have a great day.